Welcome to Week 4, Philosophy 101, in which we will be discussing the Meditations by Rene Descartes. We have left ancient philosophy and Plato behind, and now we move into modern times with the father of modern philosophy, Rene Descartes. So Rene Descartes was born in 1596. He died in 1650. He is from France, did graduate with a law degree, but he is known for his mathematics and his philosophy. Mathematics, he invented the coordinate system that you see in the upper left-hand corner, the X and Y axis. That is the Cartesian coordinate system, named after him. So not only is he seen as the father of modern philosophy, but he's also kind of seen as the father of analytic mathematics, or analytic geometry. And you can really see his mathematics inspired in the Meditations. How he approaches knowledge, how he argues in the Meditations is very foundational in its approach, like mathematics, in which he believes if he builds a foundation of certainty, he can move from that certainty to other certain things, and he will never be wrong. He will never be incorrect. But during this time where Descartes was spreading his knowledge, this was the same time where a friend of his, a contemporary, Galileo, was also being persecuted for his idea. If you know who Galileo was a scientist who believed in the heliocentric belief in the solar system, in which the Earth revolved around the sun, instead of the going belief at the time that everything revolved around the Earth. Descartes also believed in this heliocentric way of movement or planetary movement. So a lot of his meditations was kind of hold back. I mean, he actually withdrew his publications in science, specifically because Galileo was being persecuted the way he was persecuted. But moving on to why we call him the father of modern philosophy, at this time, Aristotelian doctrines, and Aristotle is the student of Plato. So we're getting a very ancient type of thinking. And at this time, in France, Aristotelian philosophy was still the strongest. It was still being debated as the top philosophy. And Aristotelian philosophy focuses a lot on knowledge acquired by the senses. In one of the famous pictures between Aristotle and Plato, Aristotle's pointing down to the ground while his teacher Plato is pointing towards the air, because Plato believed in the forms, this essential notion that one gathers and creates, but it's in the clouds. Aristotle believed, no, knowledge has to be down here in the world, and is gained through the senses, something Descartes is going to argue against. While arguing against this notion of knowledge, or the way we gain knowledge, Descartes develops an entirely new conception of the mind, of matter, of ideas, and these arguments that he creates are still being debated today. So these theories that Descartes puts forth are by no means solved. They're still being debated today. Some people say his dream argument is unsolvable. And with that, we will move into the next slide and delve right into Meditation 1. Meditation 1. The Cartesian method of doubt, or Cartesian skepticism. Descartes starts with saying, I will devote myself sincerely and without reservation to the general demolition of my opinions. He's doing this because he has noticed that there are things he believed were true that ended up not being true. I mean, you can see at this time how that would be the case. I mean, remember Galileo and his idea of the heliocentric theory. There are many theories that are falling to the wayside. And so Descartes sees this at this time, and he's like, you know what? I need to put all my beliefs under a microscope. Any kind of belief that is not completely certain, I'm going to do away with. So for the purpose of rejecting all my opinions, it will be enough if I find in each of them at least some reason to doubt. This is an example of Descartes' method of skepticism. He's skeptical about his beliefs, and he's going to put them under the microscope so that if they are found to have a small grain of doubt, he's going to reject them entirely because he doesn't want to make any mistakes here. So this method of doubt is this Cartesian skepticism. You gotta understand what Descartes is looking for when it comes to skepticism. Any form of doubt is going to be rejected. For example, imagine you are approached by someone claiming to be a psychic, and they do two tricks. The first one is completely built on probability. They ask an entire audience, draw two shapes, one shape inside of another. And then the psychic shows a triangle that's inside of a circle. Okay? And only about 25% of the people in the audience also drew the same triangle that's inside of a circle. Other people drew squares, trapezoids, etc. And then the psychic did this phenomenal trick where drew a card out and it was printed in today's paper that they were going to draw that card out. A lot of people would look at this and say, wow, that person is in fact a psychic. But for Descartes would be like, wait a minute. If they were truly a psychic, why would they have that first trick even part of their repertoire? No, that first trick instills at least some reason to doubt that they are in fact a psychic. And for Descartes, that's enough to reject the whole. And then he starts his foundationalism by stating, I should hold my assent no less carefully from opinions that are completely certain and indubitable. He wants to build a foundation. That's why this is called foundationalism. He wants to start with a foundation of certainty and then move from that certain principle into other certain principles. That way, he will not have any opinions that exude any amount of doubt. So we have two forms here. The first one is a kind of skepticism in which he's going to put all of his opinions under a microscope. And he's going to build his philosophy on a foundation of complete certainty and indubitability. Indubitable, that which cannot be doubted. Completely certain. And we'll see what he does if he can arrive at a certain point. But for meditation 1, you can kind of see meditation 1 as a methodological doubt in which he methodically doubts and destroys all his previous conceptions of what he believed was certain. And that's why a lot of people really enjoyed Descartes. I mean, I really enjoyed Descartes. He's one of my favorite philosophers. But we go into this methodological doubt in the meditation 1, and we'll see what we're left with. It's kind of incredible. Now we get into Descartes' methodological doubt, which he starts with the sentence, I will attack straight away those principles which supported everything I once believed. He's going to put everything that he once believed under a skeptical microscope and see if they can stand up to his rigorous aspect of certainty. If they're not found to be completely certain and indubitable, he will do away with them. So then he says, surely whatever I had admitted until now as most true, I receive either from the senses or through the senses. This is the first methodological doubt, his doubt of sense perception. It's not as strong as completely demolishing everything. It merely focuses on testimony or, memory-based sense perception. Because if you think about it, he realizes that his senses can be doubted. And this happens to us all the time, where we hear something wrong when a friend is speaking, we hear something wrong, or when we think we see a friend far away and we shout out their name and they turn around and it's not our friend. Our senses are not certain. Our senses are not indubitable. Our senses can easily be deceived and be tricked. Taste, smell, touch, hearing, seeing. Each one of our senses can be deceived. So this sense perception methodological doubt only appeals to testimony or memory based on sense perception. So testimonies like John was at the store yesterday, that type of sense perception can be put into doubt. The memory I have, or the memories I have that are based on sense perception, can also be put into doubt. There's an amazing article on false memories by Elizabeth Loftus. If you ever have the chance, Google Elizabeth Loftus. She does a lot of work with eyewitness testimony and how false memories are built. This is specifically what Descartes is attacking here, because our senses can be doubted. And he only wants to move forward with that which is completely certain and indubitable. So the first methodological doubt is geared towards sense perception, which destroys testimony or memory based on sense perception. Outside world and sensory knowledge on the whole is still quite sturdy, and he admits this, simply because more than one of our senses acting together usually can paint a pretty clear picture. But he quickly moves on, because sense perception isn't strong enough, to the dream argument, which we will go over on the next slide. Descartes' second methodological doubt, the dream argument. This is perhaps what Descartes is best known for in the philosophy community. He states that I have been fooled before, that I was awake when in fact I was sleeping. For there are no sure signs by means of which being awake can be distinguished from being asleep. Think about this. How do you know when you're sleeping? You're sitting here and you're listening to me lecture. We're going through the methodological doubt of Descartes, but you don't realize you're sleeping until, bam, in the next second you wake up, you're in your bed, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm doing way too much philosophy because I'm dreaming about it. The idea here is you were fooled into thinking you were awake. In fact, there is no sure sign that you are sitting here listening to me lecture. Certainty of your existence right now at this particular time is now put into question. You may not be at your computer listening to this lecture right now. You may be sleeping. And there's no certain way to know. Because when you're sleeping, you're seeing things, you're hearing things, you're even tasting certain things, touching certain things, hearing certain things. Every single one of your senses can be deceived simply because you may be dreaming. Now, Descartes says, let us assume then, for the sake of argument, that we are dreaming and that such particulars as these are not true, and that we are opening our eyes, moving our head, extending our hands, etc. Perhaps we don't even have hands or a body at all. Look at the picture I have on the top left corner. I'm walking outside in the sun. It is a brain in a jar being fed sense perception. And I know what you're thinking. This is the Matrix. Well, this is where the idea from the Matrix came from, Rene Descartes, because this is what he puts into question. How do you know you're not a brain in a vat? How do you know that you're not just a brain being fed all these senses from a machine? There's no way to know. There's no way to know that you're sitting here and clothed. And he looks at it and he says, how do I know I'm clothed in my dress gown sitting next to the fireplace when I could be in my bed? Think about what this does for his journey into certainty. Because remember, he's only going to start from that which is completely certain. He has just destroyed the outside world. Anytime I interact with the outside world, one of my senses are being triggered. If I walk outside and the sun hits my face, the sense of touch is being triggered. That trigger could be a dream, or that trigger could be something force-feeding me that sense. There is no other way we interact with the outside world other than our five senses. And if each one can be deceived simply from the case that I could be sleeping, then I can know nothing about the outside world for certain. This is Descartes' dream argument. This is Descartes' methodological doubt that destroys the outside world and destroys sense perception totally. And this is one that's still being argued today, and some believe is completely unsolvable. Because every single sense perception we have can be mimicked in a dream. And there is no universal sign nor symbol to let us know when we are, in fact, sleeping. Now, I have, on some occasions, realized I was sleeping, and that gave me so much control, and I had a blast in my dream. But that's not really what he's saying here. You may be able to distinguish sometimes, but holistically, can you? Can you be certain you are not dreaming right now? There are limitations to the dream argument. As he states, it is not improper to conclude that physics, astronomy, medicine, and all these other disciplines that are dependent upon the consideration of composite things are doubtful. And that, on the other hand, arithmetic, geometry, and other such disciplines which treat of nothing but the simplest and most general things, and which are indifferent as to whether these things do or do not in fact exist, contain something certain and indubitable. So the dream argument can destroy physics, astronomy, and medicine because these things rely on our ability to comprehend and associate with the outside world. But arithmetic, geometry, a triangle will still have three sides. A square will still have four sides. 2 plus 2 will still equal 4, even if I'm dreaming. So mathematics and those types of disciplines, which he says are indifferent as to whether things do or do not in fact exist, corporeal things, things in the outside world, things that do not rely on the outside world like arithmetic and geometry are still certain. Even if I'm sleeping, even if I'm awake, it doesn't matter. 2 plus 2 will still equal 4. A triangle will still have three sides that all add up to 180 degrees. Doesn't matter. What this destroys is any discipline that needs to interact with the outside world, like astronomy, physics, and medicine. Now we'll see how long this lasts, because the third argument, the third methodological doubt, or the evil genius one, takes care of the rest. By that I mean arithmetic and geometry, or the certainty of arithmetic and geometry. Descartes' third methodological doubt, the evil genius or the evil demon argument. So immediately after he resurrects arithmetic and geometry from the dubitable track, immediately after, he says, it's always been in my mind that there exists a God that has created me and put these things in the universe so that I can interact with them. And surely this kind of person wouldn't deceive me. So you can see he's trying to bring back the outside world or knowledge in the outside world, because there's maybe this existence of a God, a good God that wouldn't deceive him. But then he immediately backtracks and says, wait a minute, how do I know that there is a good God? I will not suppose a supremely good God, the source of truth, but rather an evil genius, supremely powerful and clever, who has directed his entire effort at deceiving me. He tried to bring back the outside world with the idea of a good God, but he hasn't made an argument for a good God yet. He's still in the process of skepticism. So if a good God would bring back the world, he's thinking, well, how do I know there's a good God? What if there's an evil demon out there, or this evil genius who's directed his entire effort to deceiving me? Well, then I will regard the heavens, the air, the earth, the colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things as nothing but the bedeviling, hoaxing of dreams at which he lays snares for my credibility. Now, what does this methodological doubt do? Well, at first, he believed, no matter what, a triangle will have three sides. But surely an omnipotent, powerful genius could easily deceive me into thinking that a triangle had three sides. What if I call a triangle? What if what I call a triangle isn't a triangle? Even more so, when I try to use arithmetic, when I try to use mathematics, the evil genius can make me believe I'm looking at 2 when I'm in fact looking at 3. Or when I'm about to add 2 plus 2, he can trick me into throwing something else in there and I wouldn't have 4 anymore. An omnipotent or powerful evil genius has unlimited power, and with this unlimited power can easily deceive me into thinking I am adding correctly when in fact I'm adding incorrectly. This is how Descartes ends the first meditations. The first methodological doubt of sense perception kind of destroys testimony or anything memory-based on sense perception. Then he goes into the dream argument, which completely demolishes the outside world. All sense perception that can be tied to the outside world, but still leaves open the idea of arithmetic and geometry, mathematics. And then comes the evil genius, third methodological doubt, which completely takes away all arithmetic and geometry simply because he cannot presuppose a supremely good God. What if there was a supremely evil genius who has omnipotent power? If they have omnipotent power, then they have the power to trick me into thinking or believing that the arithmetic is correct. And that's really what he's saying here, that he can't with certainty say that there's a supremely good God. He can't certainly state that there is in fact an outside world, because the methodological doubt he employed in the first meditation completely demolished all his preconceived notions of knowledge, because all his knowledge was based on the senses. Then knowledge came from arithmetic and geometry, which was destroyed with the evil genius. So he kind of ends the first meditation in what's called hyperbolic doubt, complete doubt. He has nothing for certain. Other philosophers, just right off the top of my head, Al-Ghazali, also suffered from hyperbolic doubt, and he actually felt ill. And a lot of philosophers, when they come to a point of complete doubt, they feel sick. There's a kind of sickness that goes along with it. And Descartes is no different. I mean, you can really read in the last paragraph, the last 2 paragraphs of Meditation 1, you can really kind of sense this somberness from him. this somber, how am I going to pull myself from this deep abyss of doubt? And we'll see how he does that, or even if he can do that with the second meditation. But for this week's reading, that concludes this week's reading. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me and let me know. I love Descartes. He is one of my favorite Western philosophers. So please don't hesitate to email me or give me a call. Have a great week. Make sure to do your discussion post and your quiz and a response. And